rain. It was kind of nuts. So I appreciate that. That's really lovely. I'm here because I care about a very specific thing, which is I think that hardware startups are the future of product design, and big companies are all going to fail. Not really. Well, kind of really. Because we're faster, we are smarter, we're closer to the customer than anybody else, and as long as we do a couple things right, we'll have a better chance than anyone else to innovate and develop the products that all the customers actually want. So that's why I'm here. I run a company that builds desktop CNC machines. So most people use them for cutting electronics or some mechanical parts. But the whole reason that I do that is because I want people to be able to prototype really quickly on their desktop. And all the photos in here are unrelated to the presentation almost entirely, but most of the time, hardware people really like pictures of inside factories. So all the photos that you see are from inside our factory. The number one reason that startups fail is no market need. And I think that this was really surprising to me when I first got into looking into, well, it's kind of morbid actually. You start a hardware startup and then you're like, what are all the things that can go wrong? But it turns out that this is something that we could do. Like we could focus on the market need, like running out of money, or the factory burns down, or like co-founders leave, or whatever it is. Like all those things are kind of out of your control. But the one thing that is in your control is this market need. So the reason why it's super important for hardware startups in particular, because it costs us so much money to do prototyping. Like to do product development. If you're doing software, it's very inexpensive, but for hardware, you really have to know what you're doing. And on top of that, nobody really knows what a hardware MVP is. It's very hard to get to the point where you're like, no, this is like the minimum viable product, but maybe it didn't need to have this like layer of polish or whatever. So the thing that I advocate, which is actually what we did at other machine company, is to just go to market before you have a product. And what I mean by that is before you really feel like you're ready, it's like you are going to stand at the edge of the lake on the dock and you're just going to jump in and you'll figure it out when you get there. And I don't mean crowdfunding, especially not. And I don't mean pre-sales, especially not. Because crowdfunding and pre-sales make you break the rules, and they really shoot you in your own foot. And the thing that I advocate for instead of those two things is building prototypes and selling them. And even if you have to, commandeer the 3D printers or whatever it is from like 3 different makerspaces in order to manufacture 50 enclosures for your product, do it. And just get a person to pay you for it. And it's so important, like that when you cross that line between having something inside and all of your thoughts about what it should be or what it shouldn't be, and then you make the case to someone so compelling about how it's going to solve their problem, and they hand you $1. Getting to that point, like hardly anybody ever gets to that point, so I say start there, and then you can kind of like file that, like okay, got that one, and we can improve from there. And telling people not to crowdfund hardware is a little bit controversial, especially because it's slightly hypocritical because our company was crowdfunded. So I say no crowdfunding, mostly it's my scars talking from doing the crowdfunding, but there's specific reasons not to do it. One is, don't ever set a price. Before you've made a product, you have no idea how valuable it is to someone until you build it and they exchange dollars for it. It's kind of like art, right? How much is this thing on the wall worth? Well, it's worth what someone will pay for it. It's the same for hardware. So if you do happen to launch a crowdfunding campaign, it may be very successful, but what you're doing is you're setting an expectation about what the price will be, not what the value will be to that customer. So it breaks that rule, so that's like shoot yourself in the left foot, that foot. And the other thing is promising features that haven't been built yet. First of all, you don't know what features the customer wants. And then the other thing is you don't really know how to build them either. So you set yourself up for a really difficult journey. The other thing is don't ever tell anyone when it'll be ready, because it takes a lot longer than you think it is, or than you think it will. And the other thing is, I learned this, Kickstarter backers or Indiegogo backers or crowdfunding backers aren't your real customers, because they buy for totally different reasons than your actual customers would buy for. There's a lot of emotion tied up into it, and they care a lot about your story. And frankly, the people that we sell to now could kind of care less about what our history was. They just want to make PCBs right now. We learned that along the way, but that's the most important one, is that you don't really get that direct customer experience. But some people are like, yeah, but can't I just please do crowdfunding? So the thing that I tell people who really, really want to do crowdfunding is either get 100 people not on crowdfunding to pay for your thing first, or put $100,000 worth of product out there in people's hands. Basically, if you had $10,000 things, that counts. Okay, you probably have enough out there in the world to know what it is that you're building, all right, crowdfunding, because like I said before, you cross that line when someone hands you $1 and they start using the thing, that's a big deal. Even though it seems small, it says something about where you are in your development and how much you've been thinking about your customer. So top 10 reasons to sell prototypes. It might be a little cheesy, but there are definitely 10 things that are important about this process and why I harp on it all the time. You're going to learn how hard it is to sell your thing. And you're going to learn that not everybody wants your thing, and not everybody cares about you. And that's hard to realize in the cold, hard, real world. But if you actually go through this exercise, you're going to have a more realistic sense of how difficult this journey is going to be. 9, you're going to discover just how hard it is for someone who's not you to use your thing. And for a product like ours, which is about $3 grand, and it requires a lot more training than we thought. If you are a person who has spent time maybe with an art background, you're really familiar with using a CAD tool like Illustrator, using a CNC machine is not as similar as we thought it would be. But we didn't find that out until much later. So I'm advocating, put your thing out there, give people some documentation, and then step back and watch what happens when they use it, because that's going to tell you about not only how much product development that you're going to do on the physical side, but how much product development are you going to do on the documentation side, and what kind of support needs are people going to have long term for your product. So get prototypes out there so you can find that out. 8, you're going to learn what people actually want. For us, people didn't actually want the first thing that we made. It wasn't precise enough for professionals to use. And the people who wanted to buy it, they didn't really use it often enough to make it worth the investment. So we got both of those things wrong. The other thing is you'll find out what breaks. So the worst case scenario is you put thousands of things out there, something breaks, and then you have to claw it all back in. But if you build a prototype and you watch someone and you're like, why do you keep putting that under the water? That thing is going to fail. You get to see it out in the wild and watch people will do the weirdest things with your product. You're oh my God, okay, we're putting safety windows on that. Definitely safety windows, all sides. And if you didn't throw it out there in the world, you might not know that. And because it's so expensive to redo everything in hardware, you have to just get it out there as soon as possible. The other thing is that you learn what you're good at. Our company, for whatever reason, we love documentation. So we were good at the documentation, but we weren't as good at marketing. It was hard for us to, we had literally knock on every single door. And so when we launched, we're well, what kind of customers respond to a company that's better at documentation than marketing? it turns out it's a good fit for engineers because engineers don't really like to be marketed to in the same way that everyone else does. So like really, really dense technical documents attract engineers, like, I'm not gonna say like flies, but kind of like flies. Like, they really, really need that. And I'm an engineer, I'm a material scientist, and so in some ways, I could be good at that, and I could geek out on that, and that was an asset for the business. But when you really do, you know, the final version of your product, what are you not good at? And you have time to fill that gap. The other thing is, what are you not good at? And do you really want to do it? You know, if you have had prototypes out there for 6 months and people are calling you every single day about the product and hassling you, it's never going to stop. It won't ever stop. And so you really have a choice. If all you've done is put a lot of prototypes out in the world and set that expectation that they're prototypes, then you have that quiet time to just make the decision consciously to say, I'm gonna do this. I'm really going to do it. I'm gonna follow it all the way to the end, whatever it takes, I'm gonna make it happen. And so it's important to give yourself that opportunity. And so whatever it takes to get some prototypes out there and get people to pay for them, advocate for. Number 4, you're willing to find out, or you're able to find out how willing people are to pay for your product. And that was really key for us. We put a product out in the world. Kickstarter price was average $1,500. No way was it ever going to happen for that, which I now know. The first commercial version of the product was $2,200. Also not feasible to support a business for a product like this. The final version that we're here, oh, it's not final. I mean, it's never final, but the current version, I'll just say. $3,200, so doubling the price from Kickstarter to now, but we actually could do that research and talk to people like, how frequently do you use this? How much money is it saving you? Even though for me, I wouldn't pay that much for it. It's not for me, it's for these other people. And number 3, which is particularly important to me, you'll feel the weight of the customer promise. I got an email this week from a Kickstarter backer. So our history was that we sold 200 of our milling machines to Kickstarter backers. And we didn't know what we were doing, so we iterated really quickly to a commercial version. But then those 200 people were like, hey, I was there for you when no one else was there for you. I gave you money and threw money into a pit of crowdfunding that I never thought I would get anything out of. And like, now I need support. Like, I've been using this product, thank goodness it still works after 2 years, but what are you gonna do for me? And so all of those people get assigned to me. That's like my customer service debt to the world is like, okay, you're a Kickstarter backer, what do you need? I will bend over backwards for you because it's important. And so when you put those prototypes out there, you're going to learn what that feels like, that you don't get to just go on vacation. There's real people out there that need this thing that you made, that they're really psyched about, and they depend upon it now for their work. So that's another reason to put prototypes out there, is because you'll understand what that's like. And by the way, these 10 are going in ascending order of importance. The number two reason is, if you need to get money to grow the business, you need to have that customer's voice inside you, because you can't, like, if you sit across the table from someone and you're like, this product is so cool, it's the coolest cool, they'll never give you money. But if you say, hey, there's this group of people for which our product reduces the cost of their development by 1,000 times, they were spending this is how much it costs, this is the market size, like, and they're like, no, we don't believe it. And you're like, here's 100 people who fit this description. Nobody can ever push you off your focus. And that's really important, because it's that passion, it's that truth that really gets people to invest in you and get behind you, whether it's employees that you eventually hire or money that you eventually need. And that's even bank loans. So not just like venture capital, but if you go to a bank, you can still sometimes get a regular old loan for your business, which you might need to do, like us. But unless you put some prototypes out there, you won't know that until long after you actually need that cash. And the number one thing that I will say, which was pretty difficult for our company to learn and nearly killed the company at least twice, was when you put prototypes out there into the world, into people's hands, and you watch how they use it, it doesn't become about you. It's not about you anymore. It is about, what is this person doing they couldn't do before, and what do they need? How do I make sure that their lives are better and less frustrating, there's less friction in whatever it is that they're doing, or the experience of living is better because of this thing that we have. And you can't do that unless you fully understand how to pull yourself out of the equation. It is about service at the end of the day in product design. So those are the top 10 reasons to do it. How to do it. Even though we built this product that is kind of expensive and has a lot of moving parts, we're able to keep iterating daily. And the thing that was the most important for our survival, besides all those other things, like on a tactical level, was just to maintain flexibility. So if you give someone a prototype of a thing, be able to get it back and give them a new version as often as possible. Just refresh it. You know, you can't refresh it just like compiling more new code, but you can set a new expectation for how often cell phones, for example, refresh. Like, what if your product also could refresh a lot of times before you ever went to market and you got closer to what actually, what people actually need. Getting as close to the fabrication as possible. When you turn all of those screws with your bare hands, you probably won't put as many screws in the thing that you build, because you realize, who's going to screw all these screws in? This is going to be very, very expensive over time. All those little details are really important. And then spreadsheets, just like, you don't need a tool to keep track of everything, nothing fancy, dump it all into spreadsheets. If you ever get to the real world of like another product, there'll be some way to get that data out. So just spreadsheets, put like gas pedal as fast as you can go. And then I know that a lot of people are familiar with what you can do in-house, but I just wanted to go over a few of the categories. Chances are your thing has electronics in it, maybe it has injection molded parts, it might have some mechanical parts like metal or plastic pieces. It could also be very large. All of those things you can now do. There's even small scale injection molding machines that you can have in-house. So I just wanted to show, this, like, I don't know, this person was like really dedicated to making their electronics in-house, but it should be a daily iteration process, and so you need to be there next to the machine. Super fancy electronics can be made in-house. The level of detail on plastic 3D printed parts is getting really good now. So you should be able to simulate even fit and finish of an injection molded part with a 3D printed part. And you don't need something that's a 1-to-1 ratio, or a 1-to-1 relation to what you're going to manufacture yet, because you don't really know what the customer needs yet. So you don't have to do a mold, you don't have to invest in tooling, just 3D print as many parts as you possibly can for your product, and then get it out into the customer's hands. High precision mechanical parts, it's now dirt cheap to be able to do real CNC. The software is free until you make money anyways, and then there's access to machines that are either here in co-working spaces, or some of them are even inexpensive. And of course, we all know imprecise plastic things you can get made for you very cheap. And I think about this, if I wanted to spend, if I wanted to get something made, and injection molding was probably what I was going to do, I could spend 10 grand getting a mold made. Or I could get $520 parts made. It's the same cost, and what I retain there, like the dollar cost is equivalent, but the flexibility cost is really different when it comes from mold. Like, I could make every single one of those 500 parts different. I could make batches of 10 and put them out to, like, you know, each group of 10 customers gets a different version of my hardware thing. Whereas injection molding costs the same in dollars, but you're stuck with it. So imprecise plastic things you can get if you need them for your product. Also large things, there's now like really low cost, large scale routers and milling machines that you can use. And then after you get to the point where you have prototypes in the field and you've gone through the pain of having to actually support those people, learn what they're going to use it for, learn how much they're going to pay you for it, disassociate yourself from whether or not this thing is going to succeed or whether or not these customers are, you know, the same as you, then you can do all the other stuff. And what I am positing is that this is the easy stuff. The hard stuff is all of that other stuff. The hard stuff is getting the prototype out there and doing all of the learning and grow, like self-growth that you need to do. When it comes to like figuring out a business model, raising the capital, figuring out who's going to support you through the manufacturing process and building the real thing, like that's actually way easier. You'll have a lot of bumps in the road, but what you'll always go back to is those customers and your connection to them and their dedication to you and the fact that they love the shit out of your product. Like, they do not want it. And I cannot tell you how many times I've offered our Kickstarter backers the new model for like the same, like $1,000. They don't want to give it up. They love their original one. And that means something to me. If everything all, you know, ends tomorrow at our business, I can always be proud of that thing that we did with those customers. We learned about them, and maybe, yeah, you know what? Maybe in 5 years we'll find out that that market, we serve it really well, but it isn't big enough. That's fine with me. And here's what it looks like. So we built a desktop milling machine. This is not a desktop milling machine. This is a CNC X-Acto knife, which was the first product that we ever built. So when it comes to like dramatic iteration on what it is that you're building, it can be as different as this. So this was our first prototype. There wasn't, I mean, nothing like this really exists. There wasn't a market. We didn't have enough money to make this thing happen. So we built a prototype of the milling machine. This was the first one ever. We took a picture of this and put it on the internet for our crowdfunding campaign. And, well, thank goodness, other things happened. This was what we built and shipped out to our Kickstarter backers. So no safety windows, dust comes flying out of the top, which, why didn't we think about that? I don't know. It had to happen once it was in people's houses, and they were just like, this sucks. Like, build me a shroud also. Like, you know, give me this thing, but also a shroud. And by the way, it doesn't turn off when I take off the window. Like, what are my kids gonna do? Oh, okay. We gotta try this again. We also built this with a contract manufacturer. Another host of things we shouldn't have done. So then this was like the first one where we put those 200, like this one, this is 1, this is 200, and this was 1,000. So this was our first big guess at what people wanted. You know, we put the 200 out there for Kickstarter backers, but because we had already made these Kickstarter promises, like promises to crowdfunding and had to raise money so early, we couldn't really wait long enough. So we took, you know, we waited for as long as we really, you know, possibly could, and we put the V2 other mill out there in the world. And this one was really pretty close, honestly. It didn't cost us, you know, we could make some money on it, at least, which was nice, but it wasn't, you know, we surveyed a lot of people and it wasn't precise enough, it wasn't quiet enough, and it wasn't fast enough. So we built the wrong product. Thankfully, we had enough time to build the final thing, but like, this is zero counts. This is like so many. This one, I didn't even count how many different things. But, you know, 3.5 years later, we finally listened to people enough. We heard it enough. We decided we can't support jewelers. unfortunately. With our team, given the tech support burden, it's really hard for us to both build this product and teach everyone CAD and teach everyone CAM. So we have to say, like, here's a bunch of other resources, learn all this stuff first, and we're psyched to have you. But when it was sort of like too technical a product for people to justify buying if they were using it as for a hobby or a very small business. So I guess I have no idea how long I've been talking, but I hope you have found some of this stuff useful. There's definitely a lot of tactical information that I have about how to do it, or if you have a part that you're struggling to get prototyped or made, I might be able to make a connection for you. And above all else, don't ever give up hope, because in the time that it will take you to build and fail at like 3 different startups, like huge companies won't even like wake up. So we still have a lot of time.